Sunday, January 12th. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri is to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Paris next week while prepping for Geneva II. UN Humanitarian Affairs Chief Valerie Amos says she has spoken to the Syrian government about trying to get humanitarian access to areas. At least a dozen people die in two separate blasts in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, while battles continue in the western province of Anbar against al-Qaeda. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri is scheduled to hold talks next week with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, according to Russian news agency Today. The Russian official is scheduled to discuss in the French capital preparations for the Geneva II conference on Syria. The agency did not disclose the date of the meeting with Hariri or give further details of their expected discussions. Lavrov is also expected to hold talks with his American, French and Jordanian counterparts, as well as United Nations and Arab League envoy Lakhdar Brahimi. A meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Brahimi and Lavrov is set to be held tomorrow. Some residents, in other news, of the northeastern town of Arcel threaten Syrian refugees with their lives if they fail to close down their businesses in 48 hours and enforce the ban on their vehicles. A source at the Arcel municipality downplayed the warning, saying the group behind the announcement was not an organized party, but most probably a few residents in the town. A statement released by a group calling itself Arcel's Youth said, "We are fed up and we have become unemployed. We grant Syrian refugees 48 hours to close down their businesses without exception and to stop Syrian vehicles or motorcycles from traveling on the road under any circumstances." Jihadist battling Syrian rebels have staged 16 suicide attacks in the past week, mostly car bombings, killing dozens of opposition fighters and civilians, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The attacks took place during a 9-day battle pitting the jihadist Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant against other rebel groups. An ISIL commander had warned rival opposition fighters earlier this week of car bomb attacks if they pressed their offensive against the jihadists. On Saturday alone, 39 rebels were killed in the attacks in Aleppo, Idlib and Raqqa provinces, according to a rebel fighting with Ahrar al-Sham, which is leading battles against ISIL in several areas. And these people use suicide attacks to terrorize society as a whole into submission, not just the fighters. The UN Humanitarian Affairs Chief has expressed deep concerns for communities cut off in Syria by months of fighting between government and rebel forces. Valerie Amos said she had heard accounts of near starvation, including in the capital Damascus. She is in Syria, and she said she had spoken to the government about trying to get humanitarian access.
Government and opposition controlled areas. So, of course, given the number of opposition groups on the ground, we're also talking to them. We have had guarantees from some of them that they will make sure that humanitarian workers are safe. We are looking for the same guarantees from government, who have said the same thing, but then both sides have to agree to enable us to go in, because you have communities that are sometimes surrounded by either a number of different opposition groups, which is difficult, or a number of communities where government forces are active and they don't want us to go in either while the fighting continues.
Coming up next, former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon is laying in state in front of the Knesset when we return. Welcome back. The body of former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon lay in state in front of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, after his body was driven under police escort to Jerusalem. Thousands of Israelis are expected to pay tribute at the Knesset. The state memorial is planned for tomorrow with the participation of Israeli and world leaders. Among the attendees expected are U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, Czech Prime Minister Jiří Rusnok, German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier, and others as well. Afterwards, Sharon's body will be taken by military convoy for burial at his ranch. Celebrated as a military hero by some, recognized as a pragmatic politician by others, and despised as a bloodthirsty criminal by his foes, Sharon was a polarizing figure at home and abroad. His career stretched across Israel's 65-year existence, and his life is closely intertwined with the country's history. At least a dozen people have died in two separate blasts in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, while battles continue in the western province of Anbar against al-Qaeda-linked gunmen who have captured two major cities. A car bomb near a bus terminal in central Baghdad detonated on Sunday, killing at least 9 and injuring 16 others. In northern East Baghdad's Khadimiyya neighborhood, another blast in Adan Square killed 4 and injured 14, according to police sources. No group immediately claimed responsibilities for the attacks. However, the al-Qaeda-inspired Islamic State in Iraq and Levant have gained ground over the past year in the western province of Anbar, bordering Syria, where it is also engrossed in the 3-year civil war. And Egypt's army chief has indicated that he may run for president in an election slated for later this year, according to state media. General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who led a military coup last July to depose the country's first democratically elected leader, Mohamed Morsi, said that he would run for the top post if the Egyptian people and army wanted him to. Sisi's comments comes only days ahead of a referendum on a new Egyptian constitution scheduled for January 14th and 15th. The referendum will lead the way for parliamentary and presidential elections, as mandated by a political roadmap set up by the country's military-led interim government. The referendum marks the first time Egyptians will vote since Morsi's removal and is largely seen to be as much as a public vote of confidence in Sisi as in the charter itself. Now, candidacy for presidency could further deepen the divisions between many Egyptians that already exists. After that, I'm going to remind you of our top stories for today. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri meets with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Paris next week while prepping for Geneva II. UN Humanitarian Affairs Chief Valerie Amos says she has spoken to the Syrian government about trying to get humanitarian access to some areas. At least a dozen people die in two separate blasts in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, while battles continue in the western province of Anbar against al-Qaeda. Those wrap up our headlines for this week. You're live in Beirut. I'm Yumna Nofal, wishing you a great week ahead. Stay safe.